Karen drove a rented U-Haul straight through my front gate, screamed, "This is eco-justice," and sent her son Chad sprinting across my pasture with a sledgehammer and a dream. He made it 5 feet before tripping over a sprinkler and getting tackled by state troopers next to my compost pile. How did HOA drama end? With assault charges and a burning barn? Stick around. It all started with a clipboard. When a woman in a pink visor, orthopedic sandals, and a faux leather clipboard stands outside your gate like she's about to audit your soul, you know you're dealing with an HOA Karen. I was halfway through replacing a fence post when I heard her clearing her throat like she was about to summon a demon. "Excuse me, sir," she called, as if I hadn't seen her staring for the last 10 minutes. I dropped my hammer and walked up, wiping dust off my hands. That's when she raised the clipboard like it was a holy artifact. "You're in violation of community harmony." No introduction, no name, just that sentence like a judge issuing a sentence to a man she just met. I squinted at her. "I'm sorry, who are you?" I asked calmly. "Karen Delaney, interim vice president of the Stonebrush Ridge Homeowners Association," she said with the cadence of someone who thinks that title should get her a parade. She pointed to the gravel road behind her. "Your property sits within visual proximity of the Ridge District, and several residents have voiced concern about agricultural clutter." I blinked. "You mean my barn? And the rooster? And the garden?" She lowered her sunglasses, eyeing my dog Duke, who stood beside me, tail wagging suspiciously. "That animal's unregistered." "That's an issue. I'm not in the HOA," I said plainly. "This land's been in my family since 1971, exempted in writing from all HOA jurisdiction since 1988. I had the documents, the county map, even the original exemption letter, but Karen didn't care. Her lips curled like I had personally insulted her lawn. Well, that needs to be reevaluated. We're modernizing our borders." Then, without missing a beat, she pulled out her phone, dialed 911 and said, "Yes, hello, I'd like to report a trespasser refusing to vacate land that's been earmarked for sustainable development. He's hostile and threatens community cohesion." I stood there, stunned. "I live here," I said, more to the universe than to her. "This is my land." She cupped the phone with her palm and gave me a smug little smirk. "My son has plans for this area. Big plans. You can't stand in the way of progress forever." Then she returned to the dispatcher. "Yes, the squatter is still on the porch." The word hit me like a slap. Squatter. On the porch my grandfather built with his bare hands. I looked down at the boots I was wearing, the same ones I wore at the energy company for 15 years before deciding I'd had enough of offices and fluorescent lights. I had traded corporate burnout for sunrises and cracked soil, for peace. But Karen? She saw my ranch as a spreadsheet, an undeveloped cell in her suburban dream, and now she was trying to erase me with a clipboard and a phone call. Duke growled low beside me as the wind shifted and carried her perfume, something between lemon disinfectant and hostility. "The sheriff will sort this out," I said, keeping my voice steady. She nodded like that's exactly what she wanted. "Good. And I'll make sure they know you've been intimidating residents. My son deserves better." She turned on her heel, muttering into her phone about rezoning and community reintegration. I watched her go, my jaw locked tight. That was the day I learned Karen didn't knock, she invaded, and she wasn't alone. She brought paperwork, entitlement, and a very real plan to make my life hell. And as it turns out, this clipboard at the gate was just her opening move. I should have known that someone who declares war with a clipboard wouldn't stop at a phone call. 3 days after Karen's squatter report, her son Chad showed up on my land like he owned the water rights. I was pruning the peach trees when I heard splashing and the unmistakable sound of a cooler popping open. Walked down to the pond, and there he was, folding chair, fishing pole, 6-pack of off-brand beer, feet dipped in the water like he was at a public park. "Afternoon," he said, lifting the can in a half salute like we were old buddies. "You're on my property," I said. "No fishing allowed." He smirked. "It's a natural pond. Can't own nature, man." "My deed says otherwise. My mom says different." And that, apparently, was the end of his legal argument. I asked him to leave, politely, but the next morning Karen was back, red-faced and flapping her arms like a flightless hawk. "That pond is part of the community watershed," she barked, thrusting a wrinkled HOA map that looked like it was drawn by a drunk toddler. "This is shared nature." I pointed at the iron marker labeled Morton Boundary 1988, sunk 3 feet into the earth. This land isn't shared. It's private, and I have the title to prove it. Her eyes narrowed like I'd kicked her decorative mailbox. You're not neighborly. You're a threat to harmony. Then she turned and muttered, we'll see about that. Within 48 hours, she reported my chicken coop for aesthetic violations, claimed my rooster was audibly hostile, and mailed me a typed notice demanding I remove the wind chimes per decibel code. I don't know what HOA handbook she was quoting from, but unless it was how to be a tyrant in 10 easy steps, none of it applied to me. Still, I knew better than to ignore her completely. I installed motion cameras on the barn, at the gate, and near the vegetable patch. Just in time, too, a week later, my camera caught Chad sneaking into the barn around 1:45 a.m. in flashlight in one hand, bag in the other. The footage showed him fumbling around, tripping over hay bales, and at one point trying to open the feed silo. He left with something, but I couldn't tell what. Next morning, I found a bag of cracked corn spilled on the gravel path outside the gate, real subtle. I filed a report with the sheriff's department. They nodded, jotted notes, but said unless I caught him actively stealing, their hands were tied. Meanwhile, the HOA escalated. A thick envelope was taped to my front gate in the dead of night. Notice of noncompliance, property at risk of forced community integration, pending behavioral review. I didn't know whether to laugh or call an exorcist. Karen also began whisper campaigns, telling anyone who'd listen that I was a dangerous drifter, squatting on foreclosed land. Neighbors I'd waved at for weeks now avoided eye contact. The mailman stopped honking hello. One guy crossed the street when he saw me walking Duke. My favorite, the teenage girl who screamed, "My mom says you eat squirrels." Then came the sign. It was a foggy Thursday morning when I found it hammered into the edge of my fence line. A professionally printed banner with pastel mountains, a logo of 2 stick figures hugging a tree, and bold letters that read, "Coming soon, the Chad Eco Community. Phase 1 begins soon." There was even a tagline in small print, redefining rural for the modern family. I stood there, coffee steaming in my hands, staring at the monstrosity like it had sprouted from the soil overnight. Karen wasn't just playing HOA anymore. She was playing developer. And judging by the foundation stakes I saw next to the ditch later that day, this wasn't just some cardboard threat. No, this was a blueprint for war. It turns out, when someone hammers a sign that says Phase 1 begins soon into your private property, it's not just a metaphor. By Sunday, there were small orange flags staked into my pasture, lined up like soldiers preparing for a ground invasion. I didn't touch them. I didn't even pull out the ridiculous sign. I wanted it all on record. And sure enough, on Tuesday morning, Karen brought company. Two sheriff cruisers rolled up my gravel drive with lights flashing but no sirens. Karen stood beside her, SUV arms crossed, lips pursed like she was bracing for applause. Chad leaned against the hood like a bored lifeguard. I stepped off my porch, documents in hand. Duke sat at my side, tail still, eyes locked on Karen like he recognized evil by scent alone. One of the deputies approached me, polite but firm. "Mr. Morton?" "That's me," I said. "We got a report that there's unauthorized land development on the premises," he explained. "They're claiming construction has begun without permits." I blinked. Construction? What construction? Karen practically skipped toward us, waving a folded document like she'd just won a game show. This land was conditionally transferred via the HOA charter agreement to our community for environmental reintegration. He's refusing to vacate. "Conditional what now?" I asked, trying not to laugh. "Ma'am," the deputy said, "do you have a legal deed or court-issued document supporting that claim?" "We have the HOA zoning proposal," she said proudly, handing over what looked like a spreadsheet stapled to a clip art map. The officer glanced at it, raised an eyebrow, then turned back to me. I handed over a full folder: deed, survey map, 1988 HOA exemption, tax records, and a recent statement from the county clerk verifying my property lines. He flipped through it slowly, nodding. "Seems pretty clear, Mr. Morton," he said. Karen's smile cracked, like a glass bowl under heat. "But this man is disruptive. He keeps livestock within visual proximity of residential homes." The deputy didn't even blink. "This is rural Oregon, ma'am. Livestock is not a crime," Chad scoffed. "Tell that to the allergies I got from his dust driveway." "You got allergies from gravel?" I asked, genuinely impressed. The officer returned the paperwork and motioned for his partner. "Unless we get a court order or criminal complaint, there's nothing to enforce here. You'll regret this, Karen snapped. We're not done. This land belongs to the community. And she meant it, because 2 days later, I got an official notice from the Stonebrush Valley Planning Commission. The HOA had filed a zoning change proposal, one that would reclassify my land as a mixed development green zone, subject to community development oversight. I sat on my porch with the letter in one hand and a beer in the other, watching the sun set over a pasture that might not legally be mine for much longer. Karen wasn't coming at me with drama anymore. She was coming with bureaucracy, and that was 10 times more dangerous. That week, I caught wind of a neighborhood meeting. Karen had commandeered the HOA clubhouse microphone and declared, "We will reclaim this land not with fences, but with law, with policy, with vision, for our children and the future they deserve." The applause was weak, but there was still applause. That night, unable to sleep, I checked the security feeds around 2:17 a.m.ing. I almost dropped the remote. The barn camera lit up. There, crawling on his stomach like he was auditioning for a low-budget war movie, was Chad. Dressed in black, holding what looked like a steel pipe and a small tool bag, he crept toward the side of my barn, right where the underground irrigation valves ran. He wasn't just trespassing, he was tampering. I zoomed in, watched as he dug with the trowel, eyes darting like a raccoon on meth. Whatever he was doing, it wasn't just teenage rebellion. This was sabotage. And I knew one thing for certain: next time I wouldn't just be showing footage to the sheriff, I'd be hitting the panic switch. I didn't hesitate. The moment Chad's steel pipe clanged against the side of my irrigation housing, I reached for the small red button mounted under the kitchen window. A direct panic alert wired to the sheriff's office through a rural responder program I signed up for last year. The alarm tripped silently on my end, but I knew it was screaming on theirs. Duke had already picked up the scent and stood growling at the back door, ears flat, teeth visible. By the time I opened the security feed again, Chad was trying to pry open a valve lid with a wrench, his flashlight clutched between his knees. Then came the crunch of gravel, sirens, lights. The kid barely had time to panic. He bolted toward the road but tripped over a fence post and landed face first in a cattle trough. When deputies pulled him out, he looked like a raccoon in a washing machine. Karen came running in a bathrobe and slippers like she'd just been called to the red carpet. "My son was helping. He was fixing a leak," she cried. "At 2 a.m, in all black, without permission?" the deputy asked, unimpressed. Chad mumbled something about voluntary maintenance for community good. They cuffed him anyway and hauled him off for questioning. The property damage was minimal, but the footage was gold. I thought, just for a second, that maybe this was the end of it, that reality had finally caught up to the Karen train. But no. The very next day, a new letter was taped to my gate. A glossy envelope with the HOA seal, probably printed at Karen's home office between espresso refills and Pinterest binges. It read, "Emergency action required. This community is under threat by an aggressive squatter refusing lawful integration. The HOA will hold a vote to pursue legal reclamation. Safety is our mission." I laughed out loud. Then I walked inside, opened my email, and typed one line. "Emma, we need to talk." Emma Lane was a local journalist I went to school with 20 years ago. We hadn't spoken since prom, but I'd seen her name on the bylines covering zoning disputes and rural fraud cases. When I told her what was happening, about the pond, the phony signs, the clipboard crusade, and now the irrigation sabotage, she didn't blink. "You're serious?" she asked. "I've got footage," I replied. "Then I'm coming over," she said. That afternoon, she and a cameraman parked at my gate with a drone and a notebook. We filmed everything: the property lines, the fake zoning map, the footage of Chad crawling like a bad action hero through my field. She even zoomed in on the ECO community sign and said, deadpan, "Looks like ECO stands for Entitled Chaotic Overreach." The story aired that night on local TV, titled "Farm Under Siege, Local Rancher Targeted by Rogue HOA." They played the night footage with Emma narrating. Duke got his cameo too, growling next to the fence like a furry security system. The segment went viral in the county almost instantly. Neighbors who'd stopped waving started honking again. Even the mailman gave me a thumbs up. For the first time, I wasn't just the guy with chickens. I was the guy with proof. And Karen, she hated that. I knew it because of what happened next. At sunrise the following morning, I walked out to tend the garden and nearly tripped over a pile of feathers. 27 of them, dead chickens, broken neck, stacked like some kind of sick offering. No note, no prints, just death and silence. Duke stood frozen beside me, hackles up. And I knew one thing for sure, this wasn't over. It was only escalating. I buried the chickens myself, all 27. No cops, no cameras, just me, a shovel, and Duke watching silently from the edge of the garden. I didn't want them to be a headline. I wanted them to rest in peace. But even as I patted down the last mound of dirt, I knew it wasn't over. The message was clear: you're not safe here. So I reinforced the front gate with a steel crossbar, added another lock to the barn, and rewired the panic button to alert both the sheriff's office and the local fire department, just in case. But it turns out locks can't stop lies. That weekend, Karen hosted what she called a Community Future Summit at the HOA clubhouse. In reality, it was a pitch meeting to turn my land into the next poster child for her fantasy suburbia. Stonebrush Ranch is an opportunity, she told the room, pacing like a wannabe TED Talk speaker. With proper annexation, we could bring sustainable housing, yoga-friendly walkways, and a co-op grocery experience to this outdated parcel of land. She clicked to a slideshow that included drone photos of my house, ones she definitely didn't take legally. The current occupant, she said, has repeatedly declined to join our vision, but that changes now. We're calling for a community vote. A few people clapped, others just stared. I recognized faces. George, Denise, the Thompsons, good people. But when fears mixed with charm, even good folks get confused. Monday morning, I came home from a supply run to find my front door cracked open. Duke didn't bark, which was strange. The house was silent. Too silent. I stepped inside and froze. The kitchen was ransacked, drawers pulled, cupboards open. My dining table, a hand-carved oak heirloom from my grandfather, had 4 jagged letters carved into the surface: "Get out." My throat went dry. "Duke," I called. No answer. I ran through the house, checked the yard, the barn, nothing. Finally, I heard a faint whimper from the old tool shed. He was inside, tied with gardening twine, tail between his legs, shaking. I got him loose and held him until his breathing steadied. That was the moment something shifted in me. Fear turned to fury. They weren't just trying to push me out. They were trying to break me. I called Emma. We went public again. The second segment aired under the headline, "Terror by HOA Surveillance Footage and Sabotage in Stone Rush Valley." They showed everything: the dead chickens, the footage of Chad digging near the irrigation, the table, the shed. Emma's narration was calm, sharp, and devastating. "What began as a zoning dispute has escalated into targeted harassment," she said. "And the evidence points not to a rogue stranger, but to a neighbor with power." The response was instant. My inbox exploded. Anti-HOA Facebook groups shared the story. A Reddit thread titled "Karen of the Year" hit trending. People I'd never met offered help, sent cameras, even offered legal advice. But the message that changed everything came from a woman named Rachel Denton, a property rights attorney from Washington State, now retired and volunteering. "I've seen this before," she wrote, "and I'm willing to help for free." I felt hope for the first time in weeks. But then came the counterstrike. The very next morning, a manila envelope arrived by certified courier. Inside, a civil complaint. Karen was suing me for emotional distress caused by aggressive livestock noise. Translation: she was trying to evict me through a noise complaint about my rooster. I stared at the line that read, "Auditory menace contributing to mental fatigue." It would have been hilarious if it wasn't real. But that's the thing with HOA warfare. It stops being funny the moment it gets legal. And judging by the next email Rachel sent, Karen was just getting started. The HOA had filed a petition to reclassify my address as a multi-occupancy parcel. I didn't even know what that meant, but Rachel did. And she just wrote back one sentence: "If they win this one, you lose everything." I didn't think anything could top being sued over a rooster, but the letter that arrived 2 days later proved me wrong. This time it came stamped with the county seal: cold, formal, legal. Notice of temporary land freeze. The reason? Pending evaluation for non-optimized land use in a mixed zoning district. Rachel translated it for me. They're trying to say I'm misusing the land by not letting Karen's fantasy village bulldoze it. It was all part of the petition the HCOA submitted to the County Development Board, complete with buzzwords like eco, redevelopment, community-centric, reallocation, and my favorite, failure to participate in projected harmony metrics. That last one sounded like it belonged in a dystopian sci-fi movie, not a zoning board meeting. And just when I thought we were hitting peak insanity, Chad showed up with a bulldozer. Not a toy one, a real rusted, rented monster of a machine, yellow paint peeling like sunburnt skin. He parked it outside my gate, then hammered a new sign into the gravel. Welcome to the future side of New Chad Estate, Phase 1 groundbreaking this fall. Below it, in small print, brought to you by the HOA and visionary leaders of Stoners Valley. He even zip-tied a laminated flyer to my mailbox showing mock-ups of sustainable condos where my barn currently stood. Duke barked nonstop for 10 minutes. I didn't stop him. That night, I didn't sleep. I wrote, I scanned it, I uploaded it. Every document, every video, every email, every creepy flyer and forged noncompliance notice Karen had ever sent me. I titled the folder HOA Karen Files and shared it anonymously through every neighborhood group, forum, HOA watchdog page, and property rights site I could find. It included testimony from George, who said Karen fined him $250, 0 cents for parking his truck facing the wrong way. Denise shared a photo of a fake HOA letterhead she found in her mailbox, demanding mailbox flower alignment. Someone else submitted a screenshot of Karen bragging online about silencing dissidents. The response was electric. Within 48 hours, the folder had over 5,000 views, and the phrase, Karen HOA cult leader, started trending on the town's Facebook page. And then something I hadn't expected happened. People started flipping. Neighbors I hadn't talked to in months showed up at my gate. Lisa brought me homemade peach cobbler. George dropped off extra lumber. Even the Thompsons, who once supported Karen, left a handwritten note that simply said, "Sorry, we see it now." Karen's perfect suburban narrative was cracking. But like any tyrant backed into a corner, she didn't retreat. She escalated hard. At 3:12 a.m. the following night, my security system pinged an alert. Motion detected in the west pasture. I pulled up the feed, heart already pounding. The camera over the hay shed flickered, then lit up. A shadow moved fast, hooded, lean, limping slightly on the left leg. He crouched low, dumped something by the stacked hay, and struck a match. Within seconds, flames curled upward, licking the old wood. I slammed the panic button again, grabbed the extinguisher, and sprinted out barefoot. By the time the fire department arrived, the back wall was scorched. One wheelbarrow melted into a puddle, and my hands were raw from smoke and fiberglass. But we'd stopped it. The damage was real, but so was the footage. I rewound the camera and paused on the moment the fire starter turned his head. Chad, same lamp, same jacket, same complete lack of brain cells. And I knew exactly what I had to do next. But I wasn't going to the sheriff this time. I was going to the press again. And this time, it wasn't just about me. By morning, the hay shed still reeked of smoke and melted plastic. The fire had scorched one wall black, warped the tin roof, and left half a wheelbarrow looking like a Salvador Dali painting. The firefighters had arrived just in time to prevent it from becoming a full structure loss, but it was clear someone had tried to torch the heart of my ranch. I handed the footage to the authorities, clear as day. The hooded figure limping, the match, the gas can, the moment the flames ignited. I didn't even need to name him. They saw it too. Still, I wasn't holding my breath. Justice in rural towns moves slower than molasses in February. So I sent the video to Emma. Within 24 hours, the third segment aired, this time titled, Arson at Stonebrush Ranch. How far will the HOA go? Social media exploded. The hashtag Justice for the Farmer began trending in 3 counties. Duke got his own gift. Agent Karen memes, ruthless. That same night, the HOA held an emergency meeting at the clubhouse. Word got out fast. It was standing room only, with folding chairs lined up like a courtroom drama. Karen stood at the front, smiling like she wasn't the villain of a viral firebombing saga. And then she dropped her next bombshell. Due to recent misunderstandings and media misrepresentations, She announced, "My son Chad will be running for HOA president. Together we'll redraw the outdated boundaries that are holding this community back." There were a few awkward claps, a cough. Someone muttered, "Is she serious?" But she was, dead serious. The plan was clear: take over the HOA, rewrite the zoning rules, and absorb my land. Was one twisted policy at a time. It was more than a delusion. It was a long con, dressed in khakis and HOA bylaws. I didn't plan to speak, I really didn't, but when they opened the floor for community input, I walked to the podium. I didn't raise my voice, didn't wave a folder like a madman. I just told the truth. I told them about the barn fire, about the dead chickens, about the flyers, the trespassing, the lies. I held up photos, video stills, statements from neighbors, some of them sitting right there in that room. I ended by saying, this isn't about property lines, it's about power. And it stops here with all of you. The room went silent. Then Lisa stood up and said, "Karen fined me $75.00 for painting my porch beige." George followed. She told me I couldn't fly the American flag because it clashed with the neighborhood palette. One by one, they shared their stories. Quiet voices that had been ignored, now rising together like a tide. The vote didn't happen that night, but something shifted. People who once nodded politely at Karen now turned away. A few HOA board members started murmuring about internal review, even potential legal liability. For the first time, Karen didn't look smug, she looked cornered. Chad, sitting in the back with arms crossed, didn't say a word, but he didn't leave either. The crowd began to thin, and I slipped out the side door into the cool night air. Duke met me near the truck, tail wagging, nose in the breeze. I took a deep breath. Maybe, just maybe, this was the turning point. Maybe the community had finally woken up. But peace doesn't last long in Stone Rush Valley, not with Karen behind the wheel, literally. The next afternoon, I was fixing the south fence line when I heard the roar of an engine. I turned just in time to see a rental U-Haul barreling down the road, dust flying, Karen at the wheel, Chad riding shotgun like a grinning lunatic. They didn't slow down. The truck smashed through my gate like it was paper. As the dust settled, I heard Karen scream from the cab, "This land is ours now!" Chad whooped beside her, waving what looked like blueprints. I froze, heart pounding, as Duke barked like thunder from the porch. The final act had begun, and this time, they weren't just playing house, they were declaring war. The dust hadn't even settled when Chad jumped out of the U-Haul like a man on a mission from whatever alternate reality he and Karen shared. He ran straight toward the barn, wielding a sledgehammer like he was in a demolition derby, screaming something about reclaiming the eco-village. Karen stayed by the truck, arms wide, yelling, "The board voted! This is legally ours now!" The fence post she'd just annihilated with her bumper still hung sideways, splintered and sad. I didn't say a word. I didn't run. I walked straight into my house, bypassed the kitchen, and reached under the stairs for the secondary panic switch, the one wired not to the county but to the state troopers. I flipped it, and then I walked back outside with a mug of coffee and let the cameras do their job. Chad's first swing missed the barn beam and cracked a support brace instead. The second hit one of my metal water troughs, which rang like a gong across the pasture. Karen was pacing now, shrieking into a phone, probably trying to rally her ghost voters from the HOA chat room. Duke stood on the porch, growling like a thunderstorm in a fur coat. And then sirens, real ones, state troopers, 2 county deputies, and yes, the local media. Emma's van rolling up right behind her. The look on Karen's face when they told her to step away from the vehicle was art. Chad tried to make a run for it, but tripped over the damn sledgehammer. They tackled him in the alfalfa patch, cuffed him right in front of my barn, and hauled him into the cruiser. Karen screamed, shoved one of the deputies, and ended up in cuffs herself, ranting about voter suppression and agricultural tyranny. The charges stuck. Chad was booked for felony destruction of property, resisting arrest, and trespassing with intent to vandalize. Karen got slapped with incitement and reckless endangerment and violating the restraining order I'd filed a week earlier. And just like that, the HOA Dream Team was done. The county board opened a full investigation into the HOA's conduct. Turns out, Karen had falsified at least 6 community votes, created fake minutes from non-existent meetings, and issued over $4,000, 0 cents, in illegal fines. The vote to remove her as HOA vice president passed unanimously. she was barred from ever holding a leadership role in any registered community association again. The rest of the board resigned quietly, no press releases, just shame and manila envelopes sliding under doors. A week later, I received a certified letter from the county development office. This time the words were ones I'd waited months to read. Your property has been reviewed and reaffirmed under permanent exemption status. No HOA jurisdiction will be recognized now or in the future. I framed it, hung it right above the fireplace inside the barn, newly reinforced, repainted, and free of scorch marks. Emma ran the final story on the local news, the farmer who outlasted the HOA. It aired on regional stations and was picked up by a national segment titled Small Town Big Stand. The headline underneath showed a freeze frame of Chad getting tackled. The caption read, When HOA entitlement meets ranch reality. I rebuilt the front gate by hand, no contractors, no permits, just cedar, nails, and time. On the new cross beam, I carved the words, Stonebrush Ranch, where freedom grows. It was more than a sign. It was a line in the soil, a quiet declaration that said, this land will not be bullied. Duke now spends most of his days under the old oak tree just past the gate. I made him a little plaque out of barnwood and tacked it next to the tree. It reads, Some lands grow crops, others grow justice. I still get the occasional visitor driving by slowly, pretending they're lost while snapping a picture through their windshield. Most don't stop, but once in a while someone will knock, usually holding pie or paperwork, asking how I did it. I tell them the same thing every time. You can't outshot Karen. You outlast her. But even as peace settles back over Stone Rush Valley, I keep the cameras running because folks like Karen, they don't just disappear, they regroup. And I've got a feeling this won't be the last clipboard at the gate. Look, I never set out to be the poster child for anti-HO resistance. I just wanted to raise tomatoes, fix fences, and not be sued for the spiritual damage caused by a rooster. But if this saga taught me anything, it's that entitlement might come with a clipboard, but justice shows up with a camera, a lawyer named Rachel, and a dog named Duke. In a world full of Karens rewriting reality with a Sharpie, sometimes the best revenge is documentation. So if you're out there fighting your own HOA horror story, stay calm, stay legal, and never underestimate the power of a well-placed panic button. And hey, if this story made you laugh, cry, or reconsider planting roses near your mailbox, drop a comment below, hit like, and share it with a neighbor who needs a little courage. Because sometimes the grass is greener on the side with fewer board meetings and more cows.